Ethan Granger blinked twice at the subject line glowing on his office monitor. Subject, termination of employment. Effective immediately. He had just returned from a late-night maintenance window, 12 hours on site, patching an edge case failover sequence that no one else even understood, when the email hit. No greeting, no explanation. Just a termination letter with a PDF attachment labeled Final Package. It was 7:42 a.m. In the hallway, interns were laughing over cold brew. The coffee machine hissed, a new roast imported from Vermont. Ethan didn't hear it. His mind played back the last 2 decades like a corrupted reel. Reboots, rewrites, server racks, proposals that were too technical for the boardroom. This couldn't be happening. But it was. Before he could stand, Miles Redford, the new chief technology officer, stepped into his office. "Ethan, got a minute?" he said with that same smugness that had grated since the day he was hired. Ethan stood slowly, still absorbing. "I already read your email," he said flatly. Miles tilted his head like a dog puzzled by a whistle. "Then you understand. Nothing personal. You know how it is. 3 junior engineers for the price of 1 veteran. Pure math." Ethan didn't answer. "Look, HR has your paperwork," Miles continued. "Generous severance, COBRA for 12 months. We're even compensating unused PTO. Ethan let out a dry breath, almost a laugh. "Is that your version of a thank you?" Miles glanced at the open laptop. "Come on, Ethan, we both know you built great things here. But systems get old. People do too." That hit harder than it should have. "You're replacing a working aircraft engine mid-flight with duct tape and interns," Ethan said. "Let's see how that goes." A flicker of discomfort crossed Miles's face. "Your access will be revoked in 30 minutes, but we'd love your cooperation on transitioning the codebase." Ethan looked directly at him. "You want me to onboard the people you replaced me with?" "Consulting. We'll pay." "I'm not interested." They stood in silence. Then Ethan reached for the manila envelope on his desk, labeled Exit Protocol. Inside were the HR forms, COBRA details, and a prepaid card for 2 months severance. He placed it carefully back on the desk and said, "Is that all?" Miles hesitated. "I thought you'd be more upset." "I am," Ethan said, "just not in front of you." Outside, the air felt sharper. The company parking lot buzzed with Monday apathy. Ethan carried a cardboard box. 18 years of life shrunk down to 3 framed photos, 2 stress balls, and an old systems topology printout no one had bothered to understand but him. His phone buzzed. "Alan, DB admin. You serious? They fired you? The whole floor is freaking out." He didn't reply. Instead, he drove straight home, parked by the quiet lake behind their house, and sat for a while without getting out. Sunlight danced on the water, but his mind was storming. Inside, Claire met him with a furrowed brow and 2 mugs of black coffee. "You're home early." "They fired me." She didn't ask for details, just placed a hand over his. "What now?" Ethan stared past her, into the ripple of the lake. "I built that system so well they forgot I was holding it up. Now they'll find out what happens when I let go." That night, he couldn't sleep. He opened his personal hard drive and reviewed old project folders. Not code, he hadn't taken any. That would be a breach of his contract. But emails, proposal drafts, meeting notes where he documented the need for a documentation team, a knowledge transfer protocol, even disaster recovery redundancies. Every proposal had been denied. "Too expensive," the board had said. "We'll get to it next quarter." Now they had no documentation, just the live system and interns. At 2:14 a.m., he received a message from Alan. "Alan, they can't find the logic layer on the rent escalation module. Miles is losing it." Ethan smiled, only slightly. The next morning, Maya, his daughter, dropped by. Law student, sharp, fiery. They can't just do this, Dad. You've got a case. I don't want to fight, but they're slandering your legacy. I don't care about revenge, Ethan said. I care about proof. He held up a printout. It was an internal system schematic, one so complex that only he could explain it. No one else even knew the names of the internal APIs. Let them play with this for a while. On Wednesday, a courier delivered a letter from the board's legal department. We appreciate your years of service and hope you'll consider a short-term advisory role during our system modernization phase. Translation: everything's breaking, and they need him back. Ethan fed the letter into his shredder. Later that afternoon, he received a private email from Ava Cho, a former intern he had mentored years ago. Now Director of Engineering at Lunaris Systems, a growing competitor. AVA. Ethan, I heard what happened. I'd love to meet. We've been looking for someone who understands system architecture on a foundational level. Ethan replied within minutes. Coffee Friday? On Thursday night, a black SUV pulled up to his house. Miles. Again. This time in person, drenched in sweat despite the cool air. The tenant portal is down, he said, breathless. Payment processing failed. Backups corrupted. We need your help. 600 hour, whatever you want. Ethan leaned against the door frame. Remember what you said? Nothing personal. Miles didn't respond. I have an interview tomorrow. You're going to let the whole system crash just because you're bitter? No, Ethan said, voice calm. I'm going to let it crash because you were careless. He shut the door. Back in the kitchen, Claire poured him another glass of wine. He took a sip and whispered, They're about to learn what I'm worth. If you've ever been overlooked after giving everything you had, type 1. The knock came just after midnight. Claire sat up in bed, startled. Ethan had been awake already, scrolling through a diagnostic report Lunaris had sent him to review. He muted his laptop, quietly moved to the front door, and peered through the peephole. Miles Redford. Again. Only this time, he looked worse. Shirt untucked, eyes sunken, hair damp like he'd run through a rainstorm or a fire. Ethan, he whispered urgently, I know it's late. I wouldn't come if it weren't critical. Ethan didn't open the door. It's late. And you don't work with me anymore. Miles pressed a palm to the glass. Please. The tenant database is corrupted. We can't roll back any of the backups. Maintenance requests are vanishing mid-processing. The whole platform's bleeding errors. Call your junior engineers. They don't understand the structure. He swallowed. You never documented anything. That wasn't an accident, Ethan said, his voice flat. It was policy, rejected at least 3 times because of budget constraints. Ethan, please. Miles's voice cracked. We'll pay. 600, 800. Name your rate. Ethan opened the door just wide enough for his words to land. You're not looking for a consultant. You're begging for a lifeline. He paused. And I'm not a lifeguard. Then slowly, he shut the door in Miles's face. The next morning, Ethan met Ava Cho at a quiet cafe on the edge of downtown. Didn't expect to hear from you so quickly, he said, accepting a mug of black coffee. Ava smiled, though her eyes held a tired sharpness. Word spreads fast when a system collapses in front of 30,000 tenants. Ethan nodded. They're panicking. And you're watching? Correct. Ava leaned in. What if I offered you a build-from-scratch opportunity, real architecture, proper documentation, redundancy, a team that listens? You mean a system meant to last? Exactly. They talked for an hour. Ava laid out the structure at Lunaris Systems, a lean but growing firm managing properties in 5 states, with plans to expand nationwide. She'd been pushing the board for a complete infrastructure overhaul. Now that Crestwell was bleeding clients, the board was listening. We'll give you full control, she said, Not just to fix what's broken, but to define what right looks like. Ethan sat back, considering. One condition. Shoot. I hire my own team. Ava nodded. Deal. That afternoon, his phone buzzed again. This time, not Miles, but Alan, his old database admin. Alan, FYI, payment processors are flagging Crestwell for batch inconsistencies, thousands of tenant accounts being overcharged. Alan, I've told them I need your schema notes. They looked at me like I was speaking Greek. Ethan didn't reply. Instead, he opened a fresh document. Lunaris Core Infrastructure Proposal, Phase 1. By the third day, the calls escalated. First, it was Diane from HR again, then a board member, then Justin Bailey, the former owner's son who still sat on Crestwell's board. Ethan, Justin said, voice low, if there's any chance, you'd consider stepping in even temporarily. The board's willing to revisit your terms. We underestimated your role. That's on us. Ethan didn't laugh, though he wanted to. You didn't underestimate me, he said. You gambled that I wouldn't matter after you cut me out. Now you know the odds. That night, Claire joined him on the deck. The lake was silver in the moonlight. She handed him a glass of red wine and sat quietly for a moment. Do you feel better? She asked finally. No. Not even a little? Ethan stared at the water. Watching something you built fall apart? It's not satisfying. It's just tragic. But it's not your fault. No. But I tried to prevent this. For years. He tapped his temple. They told me I was overcomplicating things. That custom systems were obsolete. That I was the problem. And now, Ethan said, they're realizing that some things don't come with shortcuts. The next morning, Lunaris assigned him a small office. Not much, just a desk, a whiteboard, and a view of a row of server racks. But it felt like home. Ava joined him with 2 resumes. These are your first 2 engineers, she said. Pick one to interview. Ethan reviewed them both, then looked up. Let's talk about documentation first. Already on it, she grinned. As he began outlining the architecture, Ethan realized how different this felt. No politics, no budget stone walls, no CTOs with glossy suits and no clue, just systems and people who cared. That night his inbox pinged from Diana Crestwell Corp. Com subject. Urgent. System failure. Update, Ethan. We're issuing emergency credits to tenants. The maintenance queue has lost 10 days' worth of data. Legal is involved. Miles is not handling it well. Everyone here keeps saying your name. Please, help us fix this. Name your terms. Ethan closed the email and opened another one from Ava. Subject. Board approval confirmed. You're in underneath, was a note in her handwriting. Let's build it right this time. The next day, as Ethan erased the last remnants of his Crestwell system diagrams from his home whiteboard, he whispered under his breath, let them burn. I'm done saving people who never listened. If you've ever been ignored until everything collapsed, type 2. The subject line in Ethan's inbox stopped him cold. Formal notice, intellectual property violation and cease and desist demand. He reread it twice. It was from Crestwell Housing's legal department. The very company that had thrown him out like expired inventory was now accusing him of theft. Claire leaned over his shoulder, still in her bathrobe. Are they serious? Ethan opened the PDF. 4 pages of corporate legalese, all alleging that his new system at Lunaris was substantially similar in function and structure to the platform he'd built at Crestwell. No specific code, no direct evidence, just vague insinuations and a threat of litigation. They're desperate, he muttered. They're scared, Claire corrected him. You should take that as a compliment. He wasn't sure how he felt. Furious, yes, but also exhausted. All he'd done was build something better, cleaner, documented, functional. and now they were accusing him of copying his own ideas. Later that morning, Ethan met with Maya, his daughter, and Alan, his old database admin, who had since joined him at Lunaris. They gathered in a small conference room, coffee cups, printed documents, and the smell of stress in the air. Maya flipped through the letter. "There's no legal ground here. You didn't take their code, you didn't violate a non-compete, and you didn't touch a single protected file?" Ethan pointed to the phrase, proprietary structure. "They're banking on this being ambiguous enough to scare me." Alan set down his mug. "They're also falling apart from the inside. I still get messages from old colleagues. Payment logs are failing validation. Tenants are complaining about inflated charges. Their support ticket system just deleted 200 cases overnight." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Let them drown." "But they're trying to drag you down with them," Maya added. "You want me to respond to this formally?" Ethan thought for a moment, then nodded. "Make it clear, we've taken nothing. But if they keep this up, we'll go public with the mess they've made." At Lunaris, Ethan's system was thriving. Ava had approved a modular hybrid infrastructure with real-time redundancy checks and full documentation at every layer. Ethan held weekly training sessions for engineers, teaching not just how the system worked, but why it had to be built that way. One day, during a workshop, a young engineer raised her hand. "Why not just build it fast and patch later? Isn't that more agile?" Ethan smiled. "Fast breaks things. Good systems anticipate what breaks before it happens." That night, he received a message from Jared, another former Crestwell engineer who had just joined Lunaris. "Jared, Crestwell lost 3 years of archived payment records. I saw the logs. The backup directory tree was misnamed after they fired you. No one noticed." "Jared, Miles tried to manually rename them. Broke the chain permanently." "Jared, it's unrecoverable." Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. This wasn't vindication. It was something darker, proof that they had never understood what he built, and never respected the cost of letting it go. 2 days later, Ethan got another visit, this time not from Miles, but from Brandon Lowell, the private equity chair who had greenlit Ethan's dismissal in the first place. Brandon stood in the Lunaris lobby like a man searching for a fire escape. "I just want to talk," he said. Ethan met him in a side conference room. "Look," Brandon began, "I'm not here to apologize. We made a business decision. But I need you to understand what's happening." Ethan folded his arms. "Westlake Properties," Brandon continued. "They're leaving. That's almost 30% of Crestwell's entire revenue. And they've told us they're exploring a deal with Lunaris. You." Ethan didn't blink. So, Brandon hesitated. "The board is furious. Miles is under review. We're trying to stabilize long enough to find a buyer, but without a functional system, we're bleeding." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were financial reports, internal memos, timelines. "I want to make you an offer," Brandon said. "Come back, just for 6 months. Help us migrate to something workable. You name the price." Ethan didn't touch the folder. "Why would I help fix what you all broke? Deliberately?" Brandon's face shifted. "Because you built the bones. You're the only one who understands where the cracks are." Ethan stood up. "Then maybe the lesson is, don't fire your structural engineer mid-construction." He walked out of the room without another word. The next day, Alan dropped by Ethan's office, holding a flash drive. "You're going to want to see this," he said. Ethan plugged it in. It was a copy of archived emails from the Crestwell server. Emails that Alan had quietly saved before leaving. They showed that Miles had been planning Ethan's termination for months, pitching the board on massive cost optimization by eliminating legacy staff. Ethan's name had been at the top of a slide titled Redundancy Risk Mitigation. One line in particular burned into Ethan's mind. Granger's systems are intentionally complex to ensure job security. If we remove him, we can simplify and modernize. Alan pointed to another email. And this, Brandon knew. He signed off on all of it. They were preparing for a sale and didn't want any lingering dependencies. Ethan sat back. They weren't just blind, they were complicit. And they're still trying to paint you as the villain. For the first time, Ethan felt the fury rise, real, sharp, and cutting. He had stayed silent, dignified, professional, but now they were trying to bury him with the rubble of their own failure. That evening, Ava found him in the server room. "You okay?" He turned to her, calm but resolute. "We're going to respond. To the lawsuit? No, to the story." He looked her in the eye. "We go public. With everything, how Crestwell buried documentation, how they mishandled private data, how they tried to scapegoat me." Ava nodded. "Let me call our legal team." As he walked out into the parking lot, his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. When he played it back later, it was Miles. His voice unsteady, broken. "You knew this would happen, didn't you? You knew exactly what would fail and when. You planned it." Ethan stared into the night and whispered to himself, "No, Miles. I just knew what I built, and what it took to keep it alive." If you've ever had your warnings ignored until everything collapsed, type 3. The Slack message hit Ethan's screen at 6:42 a.m., sharp, from Ava Cho. Subject urgent. Westlake migration timeline moved up. Jeffrey Westbrook wants the first 2,000 units live in 10 days. Full-scale rollout to follow within 6 weeks. No margin for error. Ethan froze mid-sip of his coffee. 10 days, not 14, not 12, 10. He looked around the war room at Lunaris HQ. Maps, diagrams, architecture whiteboards. Every wall bore the skeletons of the largest migration project of his career, now thrown into accelerated motion by a client on the brink of severing ties with his former employer. Claire had once told him, "The best revenge is success under pressure." Today he would test that theory. Ethan gathered his core team in the boardroom. Alan, Ava, Jared, and 3 new senior engineers, all ex-Crestwell, all burned, all hungry to rebuild something meaningful. "We've lost 2 prep days," he started. "No time for version 2. We launch with what we've got, and it has to work." Jared leaned in. "The config tree for Westlake's buildings is a mess. We'll need a translation layer just to map their input schemas." "Then write one," Ethan replied. "Shortcuts aren't allowed, no guesswork, no blind migrations." Alan added, "The payment system for Region 2 is still missing API endpoints. If we miss those..." "Tenants get overcharged," Ethan finished. "I know. That's what happened at Crestwell. It won't happen here." They nodded. No one asked what would happen if they failed. Everyone already knew. By day 4, they were running on caffeine, adrenaline, and very little sleep. Ava had secured a cloud infrastructure expansion with Westbrook's emergency budget. Servers were spinning up in real time. Ethan had deployed a smart middleware system that could detect discrepancies in legacy data formats and rewrite them on the fly into the new database structure. Meanwhile, Alan's script for data reconciliation revealed a nightmare. Nearly 600 tenant records from the Crestwell backups had corrupt date formats. Some lease renewals appeared to occur before the original applications. Others had missing security deposit flags. "This isn't just sloppy," Ethan muttered. "This is liability." Alan looked over his shoulder. "Want me to clean it up quietly?" Ethan shook his head. "No. Tag them. Flag every anomaly. We show Westbrook what we fixed and why it matters. That's how we earn trust." Day 6. Ethan walked into the DevOps corner to find Ava pacing. "You're not gonna like this," she said. "Brandon Lowell called." "Let me guess. One last offer?" "No. One last threat." She handed him a printed transcript. It was a voicemail. "You're rebuilding on top of systems we still legally own. If you think we won't drag this into court, you're underestimating how far I'll go." Ethan read it twice, then looked at Ava. "You still want to buy them?" Ava exhaled. "If they go under, their client contracts become available. That's worth it." He nodded. "Then let's do it our way. No broken foundations. No ghosts from the past." 2 days before rollout, Westbrook's CEO, Jeffrey, flew in. He met Ethan and Ava at the Lunaris main office, notebook in hand, direct as always. "Is it ready?" he asked, straight to the point. Ethan didn't flinch. "Staging is live. Final tests finished tonight. You'll have full control panel visibility by morning." Jeffrey nodded slowly. "I've seen enough collapses to know when someone's bluffing, and when someone's quietly confident." Ethan smiled. "I'm just tired of bluffing." Jeffrey leaned back. "So, I have a question. If Crestwell goes belly up, we might acquire their physical assets. If that happens, would you oversee integration? Both systems, old and new." Ava raised an eyebrow. "You're thinking of consolidation?" "I'm thinking of expansion," Jeffrey said, "but only if the infrastructure's as solid as your pitch." Ethan thought for a long moment. "I'll do it, but only on one condition." "Name it." "We do it right. Full documentation, full training, no shortcuts, no power plays. I'm not rebuilding chaos." Jeffrey stood and extended his hand. "Then let's build something that outlasts both companies." The migration went live at 3:04 a.m. on a Friday. The first tenant portal login came from a family in upstate New York. Then 20 more. Then 300. No system errors, no billing anomalies, no missed maintenance flags. It worked. By noon, Ava walked into Ethan's office holding 2 mugs and a tear in her eye. "We did it." Ethan took the mug. "It's not done yet, but it's working," she said, "and it's beautiful." 3 days later, a final letter arrived from Crestwell. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a formal apology from Justin Bailey, subject, "An open door." "Ethan, the board was misled. You were right about everything. If you're ever interested in returning in any capacity, know that the door is open." Ethan closed the email. Without replying, he opened a new document titled System Integration Roadmap, version 1.0. At the bottom of the page, he added a line in bold, "Designed to be transparent, built to be trusted." 6 weeks later, Lunaris finalized the acquisition of Crestwell Housing. The company Ethan had been discarded from was now fully under his team's integration plan. He stood in the old Crestwell server room, his original domain. The lights blinked quietly. The walls remembered him. Alan stepped beside him. "You want to keep any of this?" Ethan shook his head. "We migrate. Everything. Nothing half-buried. No shadow systems. No secrets." He turned off the lights. "If you believe revenge isn't always loud, but always earned, type 4."